If you've been hearing about peptides everywhere but have no idea what they actually are or why elite athletes and billionaires are obsessing over them, this video will change everything. You've probably seen peptides mentioned everywhere nowadays, but the information around them is a lot of times overwhelming, extremely complicated, and sometimes misleading. So look, in the next 10 minutes, I'll break down everything you need to know about peptides in simple terms so you can finally understand what all the fuss is about and decide if they're right for your goals. Now, a peptide is simply a smaller piece of a protein. A protein, however, is a large chain of amino acids, as you might already know. And what a peptide is just a smaller chain of those amino acids, like just a chunk of those amino acids of the chain. And your body is made of peptides. It produces thousands of different peptides that control your hunger signaling, your growth of muscle, your growth of new tissue, your skin, everything. It just tells your body what to do. And there are even peptides that you probably didn't even know that there are peptides, but you are probably very familiar with them. For example, insulin. Insulin is a peptide hormone, or even growth hormone. The difference is that those hormones that I just mentioned are naturally occurring within your body and are well researched, unlike most peptides being sold online, that I'm going to talk about in a moment. Nowadays, the peptide market has literally exploded because of biohacking culture, because of the social media trends and all the hype about it. And it's because people want to chase shortcuts, and peptides simply promise great results with minimal effort. So, people, because they want that fast dopamine, they're like, let's jump into peptides. But the problem is that most peptides, actually all peptides that are being sold online, are labeled for research purposes only. And this is so that they can actually pass their way through FDA regulations. Now, that means that for most of the time, there is no quality control on what's actually sold on the vial. There are zero guarantees of sterility, there are no dosing standards, and no long-term safety data. So you just have to understand that you're injecting yourself with unknown substances that are essentially research chemicals based on anecdotal data without long-term backing of what's going to happen in the future. Now, let's be a little bit honest with the research. Most peptides have really impressive results, but in petri dishes and animal studies. Mice and rats respond greatly to these compounds. But when it comes to human clinical trials, there are either completely non-existent or very limited. The very few human studies that exist are very small, short-term, and most of the time, funnily enough, founded by the companies that are selling the peptides themselves. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to get here and be anti-peptide or just start a beef with peptides. This is just the reality of where the science stands with peptides. Now, let's imagine for a moment that peptides work exactly as advertised on the internet, in the forums, and the videos that you watch. What about the risks? The first risk is injection site reactions. You're injecting foreign substances, and often multiple times a day. You never know if you're going to get infected or if your site that you're injecting to is going to react. Because of the lack of long-term research, there are unknown long-term effects. So quite literally, we have zero clue about what happens after long-term usage. Another risk is contamination risk. Underground labs that are frequently producing the peptides that you see online aren't following the pharmaceutical grade standards of hygiene. Another risk is the fact that they can disrupt your hormones. Many peptides acting as messengers to tell your body to do different things will affect your natural hormone production. So even if it works, the results are going to be quite promising and are going to help you in very many different ways, but the risk is always a risk. And I know you want a shortcut. I know it sounds very impressive and it sounds like you're just going to inject yourself or you're just going to swallow something and then a magic wand will move and you will grow muscle, lose fat, lose your appetite, be smarter, and all those things. But a pattern that I see all the time is that people will jump to those shortcuts or will jump to peptides without even having nailed down the foundations. Because the kicker is that for most people out there, the benefits that they can attribute or they would attribute to peptides can be, for the most part, achieved through optimizing the fundamentals. Your sleep, your nutrition, your exercise, your stress management, and your hormone optimization. Look, I'm not saying that peptides don't work. Some do. I've tried peptides myself as well, but the risk to reward ratio just doesn't make any sense for most people when you haven't optimized the fundamentals. So before you even consider testing out research chemicals and become a lab rat that for a couple of weeks, ask yourself the following questions. First of all, are you sleeping for at least 8 hours every day consistently? Is your nutrition dialed in? Are you training effectively? Do you do regular blood work and lab panels to determine your nutrient deficiencies and your hormonal balance? Do you analyze your recovery and your sleep quality? If you answered no to any of those questions, then before you even consider taking peptides, you just should fix the basics, because the peptide to this equation would just be an expensive band-aid to the main problem. Because peptides, as I said, you already have a ton of peptides in your body. They're messengers of telling your body what to do. And peptides that you buy from labs and you inject yourself are just meant to amplify what your body already does. But they're not meant to replace what those basic fundamentals are going to do for you, which is absolutely insane. And by the way, I've helped hundreds of millionaires optimize their routine, their sleep, their recovery, all aspects of their health, so that they can actually have more focus, get more stuff done in less time, and just feel at their best every single day. And if you want help with that, I've put a link in the description where I actually explain how I work with my clients and the exact process we follow, and a link to book a call with me in that page. So click that page and let's continue with the video. And after helping over 300 founders and executives dial in all aspects of their health so they can perform better in the business and feel better, have more energy, and be locked in, I give them a specific hierarchy of implementations in terms of the basics to follow so that they can actually dial in all those basic areas of their health that hugely contribute to mental performance. And the hierarchy of things you should follow and implement is number one, the sleep quality. If your sleep is not dialed in, nothing else matters, nothing else will work. The base of your hormone production happens in sleep. As a matter of fact, the majority of your testosterone production happens during REM sleep. So I mean, quite literally, it's the most important aspect for your mental performance, your health, your longevity, and your overall well-being. I would highly suggest you get a wearable device to analyze your sleep quality and your recovery patterns, such as a Oura Ring or a Whoop Band, or even an 8 sleep pad if you just want to go all out. You want to start measuring and start implementing the 90% sleep schedule, which means for at least 90% of the time you want to go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time. The second element, or the fundamental, so to say, is dieting and structuring your diet based on what your body needs, based on your biomarkers. You want to analyze your gut microbiome's health. For example, you can do a stool test with something like Viome or Biome Insight or MyBioma, for example, and analyze the balance of the species of bacteria in your gut, the balance between the good and the bad bacteria, and what foods you should specifically avoid and eat more of, and what supplements to take to optimize your gut health. Because gut is the enteric nervous system, as neuroscientists say. And you have 60% of your dopamine production happening inside your gut, 90% of your serotonin production happening inside the gut. As a matter of fact, 80% of your immune system is in the gut. So quite literally, your gut is your second brain, and nothing works if that is broken. It literally controls your mood, your focus, your recovery, your immune system, everything. Alongside with the gut health testing and figuring out what to eat based on that, you also want to do a complete blood panel and comprehensive blood test, essentially, to analyze hormone imbalances, nutrient deficiencies, and be able to tailor your diet also on top of the gut profiling to your needs in terms of nutrients, in terms of vitamins, in terms of specific things to improve your hormone profile. And also, on top of that, probably a DEXA scan would be a great idea to identify your body composition in terms of fat mass, muscle mass, bone density, to be able to personalize your training, your diet, and supplementation accordingly. Again, you might try to eat what's healthy and try to eat clean and whatnot, but dialing in all aspects of your health and unlocking that competitive advantage like a professional athlete would do has nothing to do with just being a little bit healthier. If you're going through the route of thinking about taking peptides, that means that you're already serious about your performance. Especially, I see a lot of entrepreneurs that leverage every single advancement, every single tool and gadget and hack to gain a competitive edge. And that means you're trying to be that mental athlete. You're trying to perform like an athlete. If that's the case, then you need to approach the structuring of your entire life with a data-driven approach. And if you're eating just healthier, if you're training just like I'm trying to stay active and I'm trying to sleep 8 hours when I can, that's not enough. So you need to know the data behind it in the same exact way as you do know the data behind your ads or behind your funnel or behind your finances. You need to know the data behind your health and your performance as well. So knowing that data will allow you to personalize and structure how your ideal day should look like for peak performance, how you should exercise, what kind of structure allows you to recover at the maximum level, exactly what to eat, what not to eat, what supplements to take, how to structure even your work day, your work schedule, so that you can operate at the best according to the difficulty of the task. This is something that we we do with our clients, you can schedule your hardest tasks at your biological peak focus hours, based on if you know all that data and you track it meticulously. The next thing is going to be just fixing your dopamine system. A lot of people will take peptides that are related to focus and mood enhancement, while their dopamine baseline is completely broken. So you need to address your relationship with stimulants, with your phone, with music, with how you're leveraging and using dopamine to either dictate what you should do and what direction you should follow and where to get distracted from, or just leverage dopamine strategically to use it for productivity and focus to make boring, deep, hard work engaging and fun. Now, after you've dialed in your sleep, after you've dialed in your dopamine baseline, after you've got the data on how everything affects your performance and your health, only then you need to start thinking about supplements and nootropics and performance enhancing pills. In order for me to say all that and do all that, my average sleep score for the month is about 88 to 89. I avoid inflammatory foods and my diet is dialed into my microbiome and my biomarkers. I exercise every single day and I do about 3 to 4 hours of cardio a week, and only then on top of that I take stimulants and performance enhancing supplements and nootropics. These are sort of like my cherry on top, not the actual base of the cake. And then only after you've dialed all those things, and only then maybe consider testing out peptides. And the catch is only with a qualified doctor reviewing your blood work, monitoring you all the time like you are in some kind of lab rat, and most definitely not from research chemical sites or from a Reddit protocol you found online. Because if you've done all the steps that I mentioned with sleep, with supplements, with getting the data and doing the blood work and optimizing your circadian rhythm and optimizing your dopamine management, then getting peptides on top of that to make sure that you're super optimized is a conversation worth having with, again, a qualified doctor who understands sports, medicine, and hormone optimization. And even by the time you get through all those things, you dial in all those different aspects before jumping to peptides, you'd be really surprised about the baseline that you've reached, the baseline of performance, recovery, and energy and focus that you would have reached even before you touch peptides. So long story short, are peptides completely useless? The answer is no. There is real science and real studies emerging slowly, and even some of those peptides I would assume that they are going to become mainstream medicine in the next, let's say, 10 years from now. But right now, at this specific moment, with where the science and the research stands, I just have to admit that the risk to reward ratio just doesn't make sense at all if your foundations aren't completely dialed in. And the reality is that I've worked with over 300 entrepreneurs on this. And the ones that are getting the best results, trust me, aren't the ones that are spending thousands per month on peptides and exotic compounds. But they're the ones who nailed their sleep, nailed down their nutrition based on their actual data, and fixed their dopamine system. That's it. That's where the majority of the results come from. The 20% of the 80%, so to say. Now look, if you want the exact framework I use with my clients to build that foundation, to optimize your health and performance, and operate like a machine, like an athlete, but in your business, then I've left a link in the description where I actually walk you through that process, and you even have the option to book a call with me so that we can actually show you what are the bottlenecks in your routine, in your diet, in your overall baseline right now, what you could fix, and how we could actually apply this specific process, this data-driven protocol, to maximize your health and performance. So click the link below, see how the process looks like, and if it's interesting, I can help you apply it. Just book a call with me, and I'll see you on the next one.